Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. We got a bunch of cards. Seems like Knights of the Frozen Throne is cranking out those card reveals. Every day we have like 10 cards or something, so these are going to be pretty regular, and I hope you guys like them. So what we've got in the last few days, we started with Professor Putricide. So again, the classes are each going to have like a legendary card and the legendary hero card. So this is the Hunter legendary. We saw the legendary Hunter hero. So, I mean, seems like a mid-range to slow type of game plan. Hasn't ever worked for Hunter, but who knows? Maybe there's tons of supporting cards of that archetype. Obviously, it's an extremely high power level card, but it's just kind of slow. And it combos with other cards. Slow cards that combo with other cards sounds like Mage. Well, Hunter is not Mage, so I have doubts of this card, but hypothetically it can be very powerful because, well, if you really have random secrets hitting the board, your opponent might make some dumb plays, and that's always a big deal. We have a Ghastly Conjure, 4-cost 2/6 Mage card. When you play it, you get a Mirror Image spell to your hand. This card's actually pretty good. Does a really good job of supporting the Mage quest. I know that didn't work out last expansion, but you have to keep in mind there's no sets rotating out when the Knights are coming in. So if there are a few more very convenient spell generation cards that are also pretty strong standalone, like this one, that could help that archetype a lot. And I think that is kind of like a tipping point type of strategy. So, you know, if there are just enough cards, that deck might actually get pretty out of control. And even then, even not, it's just an alright card. Like for 5, if you can get 2 taunts and a 2/6 body, that's not bad. It's a pretty good standalone card, good combo potential. Leeching Poison. Give your weapon Lifesteal. Wow, right? Like, so basically the dream is you're playing Rogue, right? And you're playing kind of like a controlling mid-range deck playing Rogue, right? Right. So then you play like a weapon card. They exist, trust me. And then you buff those weapon cards with like deadly poisons and stuff. You guys know about those. And then like level 3 is like you play a Leeching Poison on your weapon card that was buffed by other cards. Now it's buffed with Lifesteal from this card. And yeah, I mean, if that's any good, it's going to get wrecked by oozes and weapon removals. So yeah, it's obviously garbage. But it's kind of an interesting like off-meta thing. So if the decks that rule the meta don't have weapons in them, you might be able to play like an off-meta Leeching Poison deck. But, I mean, that's going to be pretty unlikely. Though, I'm sure we'll have some highlights of the absolute extremes that the card can offer here. Other than that, not much there. Mage Legendary, Syndragosa. Kind of surprised to see Mage, you know? Syndragosa I thought was pretty neutral-ish. But I guess it freezes stuff. So you get some Frozen Champions. Frozen Champions are cards, they can attack, but they're 0/1, so you kind of have to buff them to attack, or because you're Mage, you can set them on fire with your hero power. Why would you want to do that? As 0/1 Frozen Champions have a death rattle of putting a random legendary card into your hand. So Syndragosa is basically like a crazy high value card, but it costs 8. 8 is fine. 9 is where things get really rough with mana. With 8, you can often do like a freeze effect and play this, and maybe you can do that playing kind of like a control mage. Maybe some dragons. Keep in mind, some of the dragon discovery cards are going to get this card like every single time. Like, even if you don't have this in your deck, if you're playing a few dragons with a Netherspite Historian, you're just going to get this every single time you play it because the discovery options are weighted with class cards like 400% occurrence bonus. So you're basically going to see this every single time you play a successful Netherspite Historian. So something worth noting. But yeah, seems kind of clunky and slow. Speaking of clunky and slow, bring it on. Yeah. All right. So you basically speed up your opponent's hand, all their crap costs 2 less, and that can be fine because if they suck, they're going to play all that crap, and then you're going to brawl them, and then you're probably going to win. But they're probably not going to do that. So yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like a Noob Slayer card. We recently had a card for 1 mana, you get 5. For 2 mana, you get 10. Seems about as good. Well, it's better because, you know, it's still 1 card that you use up for that effect, Thing is, that's been the problem for control warriors recently. All the other classes have like these crazy card generation tools, like Priestess Lyra, like infinite spell priest generation bullshit. Like that gets so out of control. You know, warriors, they never have that, and that's actually kind of a problem. The reason control warriors don't exist is not because they can't compete with aggro decks. They can absolutely compete with aggro decks. They can't compete with the other control decks because they'd run out of cards. And this card, because it doesn't actually do anything other than helping you win against aggro, it doesn't really help the archetype at all. And the archetype's already kind of dead, so it just doesn't really work. But, you know, you have to keep in mind, things can change, and if there is any kind of like Lyra card generation effect, neutral or for warrior, this card could actually be crazy good. But until then, this card looks pretty weak to me. Cold Wraith, 3 cost 3/4 mage card. It's common. It's got high stats. It potentially draws a card. So I guess that's really good for Mage Arena. Mage Arena really needed some help. Yeah, if you play Arena, you really just don't see any... Yeah, actually you see a lot of mages. I don't know if this card is constructed good, though. It's like 3 mana, 3/4 draw card. It's okay. Generally, mages have the win condition of really pushing in the early game. 3 is kind of like mid-game-ish constructed-wise. And mages also have the other win condition of having like crazy spell combos in the late game. And this maybe helps a little with that. It just seems okay. Maybe in the right deck it's stronger than I think it is. It is a card draw after all. Voodoo Hexer. So it's kind of like the Shaman version of Water Elemental, except it costs 5 and doesn't really have any better stats than a Water Elemental, but it has Taunt. So, I mean, if this is like a Mage card, I'd say it's pretty good, but it's a Shaman card. Shaman cards are like really busted. Like Shaman minions have way higher stats than all the other classes as like a rule of thumb, right? And this card doesn't have that. So it's obviously a pretty good card just to freeze stuff. You can maybe combo with a new weapon. Nah, probably not. That sounds pretty bad. But, you know, still, it's an interesting effect. It could be strong, but it's, yeah, the stats are just so weak compared to everything else Shamans have. But who knows? We'll see how far this freeze mechanic goes, and probably have to re-review the card once we've seen everything from this expansion. Bear Shark. Well, people asked. That's what it is. 3 cost 4/3, can't be targeted by spells or hero power beast. Is that good? It's okay. It's alright. You know, stupid cards like Fairy Dragon are actually pretty problematic for like some spell-heavy priests and mages to deal with. So, yeah, it could be okay. Usually the strength of mid-range and even aggressive decks it's just in the 1-drops. So if hunters can compete with 1-drops, this might be a strong follow-up play. But if they can't compete with 1-drops, this is irrelevant. So we'll see. Decent help in Arena. I think hunters already had the 3-drop slot very stacked in Arena, so not a huge deal, but I think it'll help. Hadronox. Beast Druid. Legendary. When it dies, you summon your taunt minions that died this game. See, here's the problem with that. So it costs 9 mana. 9 mana is kind of like the pits of hell of Hearthstone. So it's not 10, which might seem better, but it's really not, because it's the same thing. It's just costing 9 mana makes it generally a worse card. There's basically nothing you can do that's relevant to the game at all on the 10th turn accompanying a 9 mana card. There's a few exceptions with Druid Innervates and like that new Scales card, but still, it's basically not happening. But, you know, the Death Rattle's obviously very strong, but it's a Death Rattle on a 7 health 9-drop. Oh boy. I don't know. Like, maybe you can combo this with naturalizing itself to fill your board with gigantic taunt minions. Maybe that can work. I don't know. Short of that, it seems pretty slow, but I don't know. Like, you have to think about it, right? Like, they play-tested this card. They probably had it at 8 mana. They're probably like, damn, this card is too strong at 8 mana. Let's put it at 9. And 9 is obviously the worst mana cost ever, but if this is a strong 8 mana card, it's probably a lot better than it looks. Hopefully. And we have a big hunter card, 7 cost, 6/7, Abominable Bowman. Yep. Pretty crappy stats. When it dies, and again, it's a 6/7 that has to die. I don't know about that. Summons a random friendly beast that died this game. you basically have to build your deck around this card. You'll have to have like a weapon slash spell slash trap heavy hunter deck. And that can happen. It's been done before. With very few key beasts that you want to die and recycle from this card. Perhaps with the new Hunter Hero card, you can maybe combine some really crazy high cost beasts and copy those when, seems interesting, but just seems like a lot of mana. And that's been the problem in Hearthstone. Fate Spinner, Druid Epic card. New mechanic here, you have a choose mechanic, you choose a death rattle, and apparently it's a secretive choice. That's kind of cool. So your opponent doesn't know if when this dies, if it'll deal 3 damage to all minions or buff all the minions +2/+2. Though I imagine, seeing as those effects are so extremely polar, that you probably would have a pretty safe guess. Though, given that scenario, maybe there's some serious plays you can make with the card. But the stats kind of suck. So I have my doubts, but who knows. We have Bone Mare, neutral common, so we'll see a lot of this in Arena. It's kind of like the big neutral minion that we've seen so far. 7 cost 5/5s just by itself, obviously garbage. I don't think it's any Bog Creeper type of card, because Bog Creeper can save you on its own, on curve, on 7. It just, shuts out your opponent's aggression. You can win from that. This card is better than Bog Creeper when you have a minion, but it's a hell of a lot worse when you don't have a minion. And I think the average result of this card is probably a little bit below Bog Creeper level. So we're talking about mostly Arena cards here, but certainly a very strong one. And we have Corpse Taker, 4 cost 3/3. When you play it, you gain Taunt if your deck has a Taunt minion, and then you gain Divine Shield. If your deck has a Divine Shield minion, then you get Lifesteal. If your deck has a Lifesteal minion, you get Wind Fury. If your deck has a Wind Fury minion. So basically, if you have Burn Bristle, the Paladin 2/2 Divine Shield Taunt legendary with Lifesteal, soon to be Lifesteal, or if you have Alakir, you basically solo activate most of that. So it's actually a pretty strong card. It's obviously terrible if you don't have those cards in your deck, but I think it's worth it. For Arena, 4 cost 4/5 is like good stats. For Constructed, you're looking at like 4 cost 5/6 for it to make a Constructed list. So is this equivalent to a 4 cost 5/6 if it activates like all but one of those? And I'd say it's around there. So yeah, actually this is a strong card. Light Sorrow, Paladin weapon. After a friendly minion loses Divine Shield, it gains 1 attack. So actually it looks like a pretty strong weapon, because Paladins with certain combos can actually just swarm the board with tons and tons of Divine Shield minions. But again, you have to think, it's like the only weapon-based decks that worked in the past were like Pirate Warrior, and that's because 1, it was aggro, and 2, it had a lot of weapons that it just smashed your face in. So this might work, but it would have to be an aggro deck. So we'll have to see. I have my doubts, but certainly possible. This card could be very powerful. And then finally, we have Bolvar. You may think you've seen this card. You haven't. It is like the old Bolvar, 5 cost 1/7. It gains attack while it's sitting in your hand, but it gains it differently. So after a friendly minion loses Divine Shield, gain 2 attack. Okay. So the old Bolvar, which really sucked, really meme level of suck, okay, got 1 attack whenever a friendly minion died. So, while you might think like, oh yeah, you know what? I can probably play 3 Divine Shield minions and they could lose Divine Shield, and wow, that could be a 5 cost 7/7. That's pretty good, right? Well, if you top deck card, and if you're in top deck mode and you have Divine Shields, it's very much a 5 cost 1/7. If it gets silenced, yeah. If it gets removed, well, you had a card in your hand for a really long time that still did nothing. So it's just extremely clunky. The old Bolvar wasn't played, and I feel like you could kill off at least twice as many minions as you can drop Divine Shields off of. So Yeah. Who knows, though? I mean, we've seen this mechanic on 2 cards already. If they keep pumping it, and there are some actual good cards that work off of that mechanic, not this one, but if there are other good cards that work off that mechanic, and that mechanic is worth playing anyway, then maybe Bolvar can grace himself in some deck for the first time ever in Hearthstone's history. Wouldn't that be grand? For now, though, that's all we got. I know there's probably, by the time you guys see this video, another like 4 or 5 cards. I'll get to them. Hope you guys enjoy my reviews, and stay tuned for the next unit day or 2.